So we're now looking at Anthony Mantha's next deal, and obviously the Bertuzzi contract had a lot of stipulations, or has a lot of pertinence to Anthony Mantha. Anthony Mantha is also a restricted free agent at the moment, and the big difference between Bertuzzi and Mantha is that Mantha did not elect for salary arbitration, which, doesn't bode a world of difference, but it does mean that a third-party arbitration process can't occur for Mantha to sign. So that has to happen naturally between Yzerman and Mantha, or, whoever's doing the negotiating for Detroit and whoever's doing the negotiation for Mantha. Still, Mantha can now accept offer sheets, which is almost... it is the most rare occurrence in the NHL, because the offer sheet rules are put in place to pretty much prevent them. They're really meant to dissuade GMs, because the old boys club hates when any change happens. One of the loudest drums that I'm going to beat as of late has been to reduce the offer sheet compensation just to make it a little bit more interesting. Still, Anthony Mantha's UFA year isn't next year, right? It's 2022.
I think he's on the same
track as Bertuzzi.
Yeah.
Yeah, so you need, just off the top of my head, you need to have played 7 seasons or be age 27 upon free agency to declare yourself an unrestricted free agent, right?
Correct.
And so, yeah, that'll bring Mantha to next year. So Detroit could be looking at another 1-year deal with Mantha. They're not going to sign him to a 2-year deal and walk into unrestricted free agency. That said, Mantha is he's an anomaly. He's kind of a tough player to project right now because he's been injured for so long. Red Wings fans who know Anthony Mantha's game know exactly how skilled he is, know exactly what he can do, know exactly how elite his shot is. And I mean it when I say his shot is elite. But the guy also keeps breaking his hands and wrists, and we won't talk about how he had his last injury with Toronto, but not all of it's his fault, but he doesn't stay on the ice for a full 82 games, and it does take him some time to get warmed up. But when he's warmed up, he is hot on that ice. So that talent, he knows the talent he has, and the team knows the talent he has, but it's tough right now.
Everything you just said leads me to want to make the gamble on him, if that makes sense. We know the skill's there. We've seen him do it for a couple years now at a very high level, and this past season at a really high level, if for only 40-ish games that he played this year. It's very rare you get a player at this age who you know how good he is, but just through a series of weird circumstances and injuries, hasn't had that 70, 80-point season under his belt. But I don't think there's anybody in the world who would question that he's not capable of putting up 70, 80-point seasons. This is the guy, if you lock him in long-term now, you could get him an absolute bargain. So if the injury history, I don't even have to say fully fixes itself, but just gets reduced to what a normal player gets, you could be walking away with an absolute steal, because there's rumors going around that Mantha's contract is going to be like between $6 and $7 million. If Anthony Mantha puts up 70-ish points for the next 5 years and you're paying him $6.5 million, that is an utter steal. Just an absolutely unreal deal. I understand the risk that comes with it, because if the injury history doesn't go away and he keeps finding new and creative ways to hurt himself, then yeah. But if it's ever a serious injury, that's what LTIR is for. But when he is in the lineup, you know he's a hell of a player. He has way too many tools to be ineffective. He can skate. He can play physical. He's dominant on the cycle. Unreal shot. Good hands. Underrated playmaker. Man, he truly is the 6'5" unicorn that teams beg for. Anthony Mantha already is what the Red Wings were hoping Michael Rasmussen would be when they took him at pick 9. And that was with a top 10 pick. Now, I think everybody saw at the time that Rasmussen wasn't Anthony Mantha, but the Red Wings apparently didn't know that. So, I mean, if they want to go on a 1-year deal with Mantha and just let's see, and they want more certainty with it, I get it. But you don't get a bargain on a contract after guys coming off a career year. And I would bet Mantha's going to have a career year, as long as he stays healthy. So if you want to get him at a discount, odds are now's your only time.
Yeah, like I think that gamble is perfectly calculated, Brad. You look at Mantha, and we just talked about how when he's coming on and off injuries, he tends to take some time to warm up, or you account for normal lulls in the game. He played 43 games last year. Let's say that's half a season just for the sake of the math. With those, like, you know, shaking off the rust, coming back from injury, like getting back to the groove of things games, factored into that, he was still scoring at a 32 goal pace. He had 16 goals in those games.
And his point total was damn near a point per game. He was over a 70-point pace. So you could say, oh, he was only on pace for 32 goals. Okay, well, he was on pace for more assists, which isn't nothing.
Now, here's the thing. We know for a fact that Anthony Mantha is one of, if not the most skilled, just raw skilled players in the Red Wings right now. We'll see as Zadina and Raymond progress. And that's not a shot at Larkin, just if you consider the raw skill and the tools Mantha has. The sum of Larkin's parts are more impactful to the team, but again, describing what Mantha can be, we know that. We also know Yzerman drives a hard bargain. We know Yzerman makes guys work for it, and if you haven't proven something, he doesn't pay you for speculative points. He pays you for results. And even then, he has to get his best players, which Mantha fits into, to buy in. Dylan Larkin's making what, $6 million right now? Something like that?
6.1?
6.1 for the next 3 years. I don't see, I think Yzerman would want to tie him closer to that number. I don't think he'd want him to go much more over that. Also, I don't see Mantha having a ton of, or I would imagine a big focus of Yzerman's here would be to say, fine, we'll sign you long term and we'll give you whatever extra money, but you don't get a no movement clause. Maybe for the first year, for the first year if you want it, or for the first UFA year, sorry, because you can't have that for RFA years. But what Yzerman would want here, at least this is my projection, is the ability to pivot away from Mantha. Not if Mantha doesn't do well. Like, I don't think there's a big risk of Mantha falling off a cliff here. But let's say the Red Wings rebuild doesn't align with Mantha's best years. He'll want to be able to move him for assets. You don't want to get stuck with a guy who's, yeah, he'll be good for your team, but not when your team needs it. Then you're going to get Mantha at age 32, 33, which is still probably a good player, but not the same kind of Mantha at age 26, 27.
Look at every team that has won the cup recently, and they all have one thing in common. They have one or multiple of their star players on bargain contracts. When Washington won the cup, Nicholas Backstrom was making like $6 million. And even you could argue Ovechkin at under $10 million at the time was a bargain, and John Carlson was making 5 or 6 something. When St. Louis won it, Tarasenko was making 6 something. Ryan O'Reilly was 7 something. Pietrangelo was on his last contract, which was cheaper. Jaden Schwartz, I think, was on something like absurd. I mean, I could go on and on and on. Even you look at Tampa Bay this year, they have the best defenseman in the world for, is he even at $8 million? I feel like he's under $8 million.
I thought it was 8 something. I'll look it up in a sec.
Yeah, it's insane. That's what you need to win. It sucks to say, but if the Red Wings paid all their players what they are worth, they would not be able to compete by the time they get good.
7.875, you were right.
For the best defenseman in the world. That is absurd. He's $12 million minimum if he goes to free agency in a normal UFA period right now.
5 years left. Victor Hedman, 5 years left on that contract.
It's disgusting.
Deal. Yeah.
So I again, circling back, I understand the risk with signing Mantha long term, but you got to get a couple of these right, or you're not going to be able to compete. And as the easy argument to say is here, well, we already got Larkin on a bargain. We have Larkin on an absolute bargain right now, but that contract's going to expire before the cup window opens, and his next contract won't be a bargain. So you got to start planning ahead for things like that. So if Larkin's up in 3 years and and his contract goes from 6.1 to, let's say, like $9 million, you know what helps with paying Larkin $9 million? If you're only paying Mantha 6.5.
Yeah. And like, look at who's Yzerman has signed in the past. He signed Steven Stamkos for 8.5. So you don't think that factored into him being able to sign in Victor Hedman at 7.875? Victor Hedman, who ostensibly has a bigger impact on that team than Steven Stamkos and did during the Stanley Cup run, That's what you have to do. And there is a lot to be said. I can't believe we're going to draw this parallel, but we talk about intangibles in hockey players. You need to look at intangibles in GMs and roster construction. Getting guys to buy into a system is important. When Mantha, if Bertuzzi and Larkin and Mantha, the de facto core of this team right now, the three most impactful players right now, let's assume, not counting Zadina, even though I think he'll have a big year. If those guys all sign for a deal that says, wow, that's great value for Detroit, when Zadina signs his deal, when Lucas Raymond eventually gets off his ELC and signs his deal, when future Red Wings draft pick Owen Power signs his next deal, his first, non-entry level contract, there is a system and there is a structure of core players who are buying in and signing for a little bit less because they believe in a winning team. And that's what Steve Yzerman is looking to build. And that has started with Larkin, which that credit where credit's due. That was a fantastic contract with by Ken Holland. It is continuing now with the rest of the Red Wings this year and Tyler Bertuzzi so far. And I will bet that it's going to continue with Anthony Mantha. And if not, don't be surprised to see that story end.
And it's easy to dismiss the upcoming contracts of players who haven't even played in the NHL yet. So let's assume Seider and Raymond stay in Europe for this entire season. Well, top players are getting paid out of their entry-level contracts now. Those 2-year bridge deals aren't super common anymore. So if Lucas Raymond is as good as advertised, if Mort Seider is as good as advertised, 4 years from now, they're going to get paid. And if they're not, that's a bigger problem. But let's assume everything goes well. So Anthony Mantha and Tyler Bertuzzi and Dylan Larkin will all likely have contracts still with the Detroit Red Wings at that point. And Mantha's and Bertuzzi's are likely going to be signed in the next calendar year and they will still likely be active when Raymond and Seider's next contract comes up. And that's not including Zadina's. That's not including any of the other rookies who might come up and play well. Who knows what happens with, Albert Johansson or William Wallander, hypothetically. You got to plan on that. The Red Wings don't have a long-term goalie solution yet. So God knows where they're going to put that money. So yeah, it's easy to say, all right, it's okay. Let's just kick Anthony Mantha's can down the road, and then he pops off for 90 points this year, and we're paying him $9.5 million next year. Like, it matters. It's a risk, but it matters. We're less concerned with Bertuzzi because I think the Bertuzzi's number is going to probably fall between 4 and 6 either way on the AAV, so it's not like that. But Mantha is 140 goal season away from adding $2-3 million to a long-term ask.
Okay, so that is Bertuzzi and Mantha's contracts discussed. That'll be the last time we ever talk about it. Just kidding. I'm sure it'll be the topic of a lot of conversations for the next calendar year.
Thanks for tuning in to the Winged Wheel Podcast. Be sure to check out wingedwheelpodcast.com, where you can subscribe to the show on iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. You'll also find links to other ways to support the show, such as Patreon, official podcast apparel, and more. And don't forget to follow the show on Twitter at Winged Wheel Pod. And of course, the hosts at Brad Crisco, at Ryan Hanna WWP, and at Hockey Town Evan.